Hello and welcome to Geraumt, the podcast on all things environmental graphic design, or as it is now called, experiential graphic design. My name is Christian Lunger. I'm a service designer and information designer, and today we have a very interesting conversation ahead of us, an English one, as you can hear, not a German one. The conversation will be with David Jorritsma. He's from Canada, from Burlington especially, and he's, let's say, the creator and the founder of SignAgent. For those who don't know SignAgent is a software that helps us designers and different kind of companies that have to create, to manage, and to organize their signage. In projects or within their company to do exactly that. And it's a very helpful software. We are using it in our daily work. And well, David has roots in Europe, especially in the Netherlands. And I'm really looking forward, David, to talking to you. And thanks for giving us, well, your time. I think it's early in the morning where you are situated, because it's about 4 o'clock here in Austria. How is it going on your side? Very welcome to David.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It's 9:14 here, so in the morning. So yeah, but it's not super early. So I normally like to get a good start at the day.
So, well, the first questions, we know each other for some time now, and we already talked a lot about SignAgent. But one question that always interested me a lot is, and we've never talked about that, uh, how SignAgent actually came to be. So, why did you have that idea? And sometimes maybe the most important question is not about having the idea, but how did you actually decide to actually spend time and to develop a software like SignAgent?
Okay, yeah, I guess depends on how far do you want me to go back. I can sort of do the abbreviated version of it, um, which so I mean I started in high school just as a normal high school student. I really leaned into arts and architecture and drafting.
Mhm.
And then from there, I could have gone into a 4-year co-op in architecture, but I thought that that was a little too committed to do that, or I could do a 1-year art fundamental course. And the art fundamentals course I got into, and one of the classes there was a graphic design class, amongst the other classes were like painting and figure sketches and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I gravitated towards the graphic design side of things. So I had this like graphic design and architecture sort of leanings. And then from there, the I was basically said, hey, you should go into graphic design full time. And then in the last class of the 3-year graphic design course at Sheridan, there was an information design course. And that
Mhm.
information design course, one of the last assignments was wayfinding. So
Mhm.
at that point, I was sort of getting a little disillusioned with graphic design, sort of doing advertisements and marketing stuff. Not to say that's not important, because I now appreciate it for marketing, SignAgent, and all those things. But um, I say that wayfinding sort of found me, because in that last class, my future bosses came in to the classroom, and they sort of slammed down all the location plans and message schedules and technical drawings of the Air Canada Centre, where the
Mhm.
Toronto Maple Leafs play and the Toronto Raptors play. And I was like, oh man, I want to work for those guys. So I basically went and worked for them uh, right out of college. Um, and then my first course there, my first day there. They're like, "Hey, you're the new guy. Go sit in this room and sort of be a fly on the wall." And in that room, they were discussing the standards of how they document things, right? So even in the college course, I was trying to figure out how to do location plans where the information from the message schedule is connected in a way, right? So that I'm not
Yeah.
wasting an effort.
I remember, David, when we talked, when we met for the very first time, when we talked for the very first time, you actually were still doing strategic work, doing positioning plans, doing analysis of premises. So basically, you're one of the, let's say, your story kind of is one of the seldom ones where a professional within the discipline develops a software for other professionals and for the premises, of course.
Yeah, yeah, and like at that point, like so I was working for Entro, and basically they, I had kept saying, we keep making mistakes on these location plans and message schedules, and it's costing us time and money and
Hmm.
the customer like reputation, all those things, right? So, and they sort of basically said, that they weren't interested in doing that, right? So I decided at that point, like I loved working there. I loved the program. It was back in the days when they called it environmental graphic design,
Hmm.
now being known as experiential graphic design. But it was great. And so I ended up, leaving there after 5 years of commuting from Burlington to Toronto. Um, and then from there, I went on to subcontract at the city of Burlington for a little bit, helping them actually build their exterior wayfinding program. But then I also sub consulted for companies like, as you were mentioning,
Hmm.
um, and I just assumed that these companies would have good systems like not as well, but I assumed they would have good systems, right? So I went and did some work for 212 Associates in New York,
Hmm.
and they were doing the same thing, like the FileMaker, Illustrator, and no connection, right? So, and then I met with Calori Vandenaden, which was actually bought by Entro later on, and they were doing the same thing. So I started realizing that this is not like it's a systemic thing where the our industry was underserved by technology. So that's at the point where I was like, okay, I now have to, build the system, right?
Hmm.
So it's like there has to be a better way. And then I looked to see a better way, and there wasn't a better way. And I guess naively jumped into being like, well, it's worth it, and I think it definitely is now. But
Yes.
it's
I,
definitely been a challenging a challenging course for sure.
mhm. What I can say as a designer who's using the software is, I mean, for me personally, we're in the age of digitalization, and where you evaluate all the processes you have to manage within a company, and you think about how to digitalize them. And if I look at how SignAgent has changed our work, for me, it was like a professional a step into working more professionally, because we were actually able to digitalize this planning process that we had. Other processes like creation processes and so on, or sales processes, they all have their software programs. And now with SignAgent, we had this one where we could actually digitalize this, especially in a connected way, as you said,
Yeah,
this process, which was quite helpful and necessary, to be honest.
yeah, and it's so I always I love hearing that from my clients. It kind of always gets me, fired up and remotivated kind of thing. So, but sort of going through and doing this process, that's where I've kind of realized that, you know, it's actually not just enough for us to make it easier for the designer. And that was my background. So it was like just a tool that I would want to use as a designer to do this work. But the thing is that the value that is generated by the system, because it's online and accessible, the value to your client to sort of manage and maintain that work on an ongoing basis after the fact is like it's an additional sort of a polishing of a gem that wasn't available before, right? Giving them a PDF message schedule and a PDF location plan as a deliverable just meant in the past that they're going to struggle to replace it, and they're going to come back to you, but you don't necessarily want to deal with a 1 hour or 2 hour program, right? So it ends up just overall not good for the client and not good for the overall system. So that's where the idea now of making it so that it's actually the ownership is for the client to own the system, and the designers and the builders and the people managing all sort of come into their ecosystem and perform their tasks in their.
Which makes sense, because if you look at like let's say the lifeline, is it lifeline? I'm not sure if this is the correct word, but if you look at the whole process of wayfinding systems, we as designers, we kind of accompany them for a specific phase in time. And if there is like this cut where the project ends and the actual life of the wayfinding system begins, that's where they need something there as well. So you kind of start creating assets during the project that can actually be used later on when it's all about the daily life of a wayfinding system, the changes, the things, basically the things you have to change on a daily, on a monthly, on a yearly basis.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly right. Yeah, and in the past, it wasn't a myopic approach, because we were still trying to make the best system that would want to be used, and design, like what I say now is that everything that's in SignAgent right now is basically design tools, and things that we're adding on in the future are now going to be broken out into build tools and manage tools. And that's just going to be different behaviors on the sign, or different projects sort of within SignAgent to give the person who builds the signs different tools.
If you're talking about building the signs, you're talking about the fabricators?
Yes.
Or are you seeing the designer as part of, let's say, the building system?
It would be the fabricators. So we kind of looked at the nomenclature of what sign fabricators or sign design, like builders, or the different ways that they're known, that industry, and we decided to sort of group it into a more of a friendly term that is build, right? So you build the signs and then design the signs, and it kind of makes sense with the design build system. There's some companies that will design and build, and so we basically just said, okay, well, you can be a design, you can be a build, or you can be a design build, and then you can also potentially have a managed contract with the client as well, right? So
what is the managed contract?
Well, if, say, for a hospital, right, they may not have the staff to handle the management of a wayfinding system. So you may have a contract with the client to manage their project, or manage the wayfinding for the hospital. So issues and queries would go to you to do that. And so we're trying to give them the tools to facilitate that, right? So they're getting, if they're using SignAgent, they can basically work with the design professionals. They can come to you and say, okay, we need you to design a new wing. We're building a new wing, and we need the wayfinding to be integrated into our previous wing. So then they could give you permissions to their organization. You do the work in there. You submit the signs to be ordered, and that's the thing that we're working on right now, is actually being able to order signs
Mm-hmm.
in the system, and then it goes to the builder, and the builder then is able to, in a different view of it's like a Kanban view, or a sort of an agile view, where they can actually say, we've received the order, we're working on the order, and we've
Mm-hmm.
completed the order. And then inside the working on the order, they'll even be able to go even further to say, well, this is it's a Sintra sign, so we need to cut it as the first phase, then we need to apply the vinyl, or we need to paint it, right? And then we need to apply the vinyl, and then we need to, right? So all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, they can break it down per sign type, the processes that are required, and then they can basically, similar to, agile. Are you familiar with?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they'll be able to then take basically the project management, saying, okay, these signs are now being cut, these signs are now being painted, these
Mm-hmm.
are now being applying vinyl, and now they're
Yeah, that's actually
completed.
a feature for those who have never had a look on SignAgent. There is a feature where you can actually build your own workflow with specific folders, and you can move all the signs that, let's say, you have a premises and manage it with, let's say, 5,000 different signs. And you just, the normal way within a project, how we perceive is that as soon as the project starts, it gets different kind of time frames, and so within SignAgent, it's really easy to manage like different time frames. This set of signs is within this time frame, and this set of signs is within another kind of workflow. And this is like has reduced much of the craziness of a project, uh, if you compare it to managing every that with Excel and Outlook and InDesign or Illustrator. So
Yeah.
everything is really included. That was really, and it's not, that's not even just from a designer's point of view, but this is everybody who deals with science actually has the same workflows. So the title designer or facility manager is just like a detail. Actually, they all have the same processes to manage.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few things that were like maintenance protocols and stuff like that we'll be adding into the manage functions.
Mhm.
So
You 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 did a change in your branding some time ago. I realized. How did that come along? So what was the decision? I mean, you had the other SignAgent logo for quite some time, so I think that had something to do with your decision to do a rebranding. But what was at the core of it to actually go do the rebranding? I'm asking that as a graphic designer. It's always
yeah,
interesting to
yeah.
hear the stories behind.
So yeah, it was definitely the original SignAgent logo is basically um, it's an S made with arrows, and it sort of weaves through, and it's a bit like a synchronization um, logo, right? Like it's kind of like you see one side and the other side syncing, um, and we realized that we don't synchronize anymore, right? Before it was you remember the file maker
Hmm.
and InDesign, right? Command Shift 1
Hmm.
switch, or is it Command Shift 2 switch to the other one, Command Shift 2 sync, right? And then you can maybe go get an espresso and then come back and it's done, right? So we kind of had that system, and that was actually the logo was something I designed myself as a graphic designer, and um, really the issue is that we never built a brand around it. It was just a logo, and I've hired. Um, I actually we have one graphic designer other than myself on staff. So we have marketing and sales and success and development
Hmm.
and yeah. So but no designers. So it was I and being a graphic designer as the owner and president of a company, my attention to detail was kind of like I would say too many times, like, "Hey, I think I just threw up in my mouth," when somebody tried to come up with a solution that would be a marketing piece, right? Because they're sort of pulling it out of a hat. Like, what can we do to this, right? So I was like, we really need a system that is sort of templated and sort of has um, the proper, um, you know, this is the cap height, this is the spacing, this is the, the leading and all that stuff sort of developed and protocols to follow, so that it's much harder for non-design people to sort of shoot themselves in the foot, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then so that's when we said, okay, well, if we're gonna do that, do we do that around the existing logo? No, it doesn't really match um, what we do anymore. So then we had worked with J2, which is actually a sister company of Exit Design out of Philadelphia, who's a client
Hmm.
of ours, and we worked with them, and we came up with the idea of sort of three triangles coming together, converging,
Hmm.
with the different colors representing manage, design, and build. And then they sort of all point, they sort of come together, the triangles, but the way that we situated them is that they're actually pointing visually. They always point in the same direction three ways, but the way that it was orientated, it's sort of pointed as an arrow pointing to the right or to forward. So, and it was like the tagline being "Lead the way,"
Hmm.
which was basically an imperative to our design firms, and like basically we want to give the tools to the owner to help them lead the way, help designers lead the way, help, you know, everyone basically lead the way, so that people don't get lost in wayfinding situations.
Excellent. Actually, I did some research because I'm quite interested in like leadership principles for sales, and there is this leadership principle, model the way, and I asked myself if lead the way had kind of some kind of connection to this leadership principle. Actually, when I read it first, probably because I had this topic in my mind. I'm not sure if they have something to do with each other, because I like lead the way because it's part of the wayfinding, and it fits perfectly to what we do on a daily basis. But is there any connection to that, or is it just something in my head, which could be possible?
It was an unintentional connection, but I'm sure that the same principles apply. I would think, right? So
From my point of view, yes, it fits. Actually, when I read your lead the way for the first time, I thought, isn't that the leadership principle? And I did my research, and no, it's model the way, but it's very, very close, and it fits like from its, let's say, what's behind the actual principle. That fits quite well. Um, David, do what? I mean, we talked about the past. We talked about a little bit about the present. You dropped some hints about where it's going to go with SignAgent, but I would like to ask this question specifically again. Um, what will happen with SignAgent in the coming years? Where do you intend to lead it?
yeah, so we've actually been using a shape. It's called the shape up methodology recently. We've actually switched to it. So prior, um, we were doing an agile sort of workflow, and we've switched to shape up, which is actually a 37 signals sort of protocol, if you will. But basically, what they're saying is that we're actually not building a roadmap that we are sort of forced into now. I guess is a long way to go around to answer the question.
Hmm.
So the roadmap is basically 6 weeks or 8 weeks at a time, and then
Okay.
we basically determine what we want to do in those 8 weeks, and then put a value on it bet on it. You can look it up later on. There is actually a book on that as well, so that could be one of the recommendations there. But the things we're currently working on right now and will be like shipped, will be done sort of sooner, are like being able to order signs in the system. So taking a state and converting it to an order, and then working with the builder and working with the builder to get a price. Once you've confirmed the price, ordering it through the program, having products in the marketplace. So, like Modulex's sign products, or Dan signs, or any other sort of product system will be in there as a library to choose from starting from a sign type, right? So you could
But
say, I
we're
want to
talking
create
about sign products, or is there other products as well? Are you focusing on the sign part of the product range?
Yes. And like, I mean, are you talking like color libraries, like paint libraries? Is that what you're...
Yeah, I think if you talk about the relevant products within our community, if I just look at the wayfinding system, it's like, for example, you can have a design templates that you could sell, or pictogram templates.
Yeah.
That's on the graphic design side. But apart from the signs, there's different kind of street furniture, for example, that we sometimes need, like a bench, a specific bench, or like an information point that is more than just a sign. So my question was basically seeing what the extent of your product definition is, that could be available then.
Yeah, I definitely, like, we will be going towards the templates being available as well, but the first step
Hmm.
is that product, like the bones of the sign itself, and the specifications will be pickable from a marketplace, and then we'll be adding
Hmm.
the sort of the visual elements of, say, a well designed sign that could be used as a template.
Hmm.
Um, and then an installation app, so an Android and iOS compatible um, app specifically for installing signs is being worked on actively right now.
Hmm. At the moment, the app is available on Apple systems. Is that correct? It's like the ones we use for the sign for the location audits.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Hmm.
and so that one will still exist, but that one is, yeah, it's iOS only.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but we've been
Also,
developing
you're
one
doing a
that's...
specific one just for the installation process.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to see that. That sounds interesting. Um, to see what kind of features you actually have thought about within this app. So, what kind of problems you're going to solve with this app? Will this be available? Is this something for the fabricators, or for the whole, let's say, the whole system designers, for premises, and for the fabricators? Or is it tailored to a specific need of one of these groups?
Yeah, it's tailored towards the builder, but
Hmm.
really anybody can be invited to it, right?
Hmm.
Um, so the process is really to basically say that these signs need to be installed, or after they're built, the natural progression would be to have the signs installed, um, and then once they need to be installed, we're giving them the tools to sort of invite anybody in. And it's actually the charge is not to the user, it's
Hmm.
to the sign. So
Ah.
somebody will pay for the sign to be installed, and that way we don't have to have um, like a mobile license per se
Hmm.
inside that installation app. You can be invited to it, and you can then do it. So
Hmm.
we have many we have many build firms that they'll use subcontracted installers, and the complaint is like, well, these installers don't use Apple, and they also don't want to pay the subscription fee for the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to sort of enable, disable users, and it's a real sort of it just pushes the complication further upstream, but into user management, right? And so what we're trying to do now is say, okay, well, let's get the user management out of it. We'll make it easy. You have 50 signs that need to be installed. You order the installation. It creates a new project in SignAgent, and moves the signs into that project. And then that project basically says people inside this project do not need to be full-time users, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can install till their heart's content, giving them the tools to, photograph the sign, make notes, and all that information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much going to be just inside that project, right? So they won't be drinking from the fire hose of seeing all of the sign templates. It's just the signs that are in the inside those projects that they will see.
There is one question that is on my mind. I just wanted to ask you, because I know you have this powerful design tool implemented in SignAgent where you can automate the creation of designs. Um, and I've just wondered lately. I mean, AI is like everybody's talking about it, and you basically you can't open a software where there hasn't popped up a AI named feature within the software. So I was just wondering because if I look at the whole management element and creation element that can be handled within SignAgent, I wondered if this is something you were looking at as well within your 6 week time frame, or maybe with the time frames beyond that. Is that something you were thinking about, or did you say let's have the hype with the other ones? We're concentrating on other things right now, maybe later on.
Like AI in general is.
Yes, AI. Let's say I just giving you an example with Evernote. I mean, before there were some organization tools of notes within Evernote,
Yeah.
and once AI, everybody was talking about AI. I opened Evernote after an upgrade. At least it felt for me like that. And suddenly, certain features just had the little add-on AI organization of notes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was wondering if you were thinking about how can AI be implemented in SignAgent to automate processes or to improve certain processes. Is that something you have on your mind? Is that basically on your roadmap at the moment?
I would say that it's definitely on our mind. It's not in the current sort of shape up
Mm-hmm.
roadmap, but it will happen eventually. I think that to me it's the marketing. Um, yeah, we're still working towards the really getting the tools for the ordering of the signs, and then
Mm-hmm.
the marketplace in there. And once that sort of has settled, then we'll sort of look at those types of things as well. And like
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at integration with Revit as well, and those types of tools.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's a matter of finding and establishing sort of a good routine that works for both, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, I sort of say like Revit is like trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer when you're trying to document wayfinding, because you need to be able to act and react really quickly when it comes to signage and wayfinding. And if you're reliant on a tech that a Revit tech to be able to make a change so that you can update a sign message in your in your database
Mm-hmm.
to get it done right, you end up reacting far too slow. When if you're using SignAgent, it's if you can internet bank and you understand your wayfinding system, you should be able to use SignAgent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're trying to build it. So we want to build out these tools that, help, help people do that. So when we do the Revit, we don't want it to be more complicated and sort of raise the technical um,
Mhm.
issues for the user, right? And so, but AI certainly we're keeping an eye on it, and but not actionable at this point.
You mentioned a reading tip, the one about how, basically how I understood it is about how it's a book that shows you a different way on how to plan ahead. Is that correct? Because I didn't know
Yeah,
the book you mentioned. Which book is it, and what's it about?
yeah. So it's called Shape Up, or I think it's called the Shape Up methodology,
Hmm.
and it's by 37 Signals. So the makers of Basecamp. Um, yeah, and they just talk about their methodology and basically how many developers sort of look at best principles, and they sort of look at Facebook and they go, what's Facebook doing? And then they say, because we should be doing what Facebook's doing, or
Hmm.
what's Google doing? We should be doing what Google's doing. And it's like they have hundreds, if not maybe thousands, of computer programmers. So it's actually not they're not what you should be doing, right? So what they're saying is like we're a smaller firm, and they're very opinionated in a way, but it's just interesting how they sort of basically challenge you to think differently about it. Like 2 weeks
Hmm.
of a scrum or a of an agile sprint is sort of not a lot of time to get it done, and then you have to implement it, and then you're sort of moving on, and you're constantly doing this process, and
Hmm.
then you're also not letting the programmers basically really get a true understanding of what they're doing. They just become sort of code monkeys and do what they're told to do.
Hmm.
And this other process is like you have 6 weeks to do this. This is what we needed to do. This is the main pathway of what needs to be solved here. And by the end of 6 weeks, you have to decide, okay, now we need to make some value judgments and maybe remove this or make this a little simpler, right? But in 6 weeks, you're pushing it, and then there's a 2 week cool down where you basically work on bugs and sort of other interesting pursuits, such as looking at different technologies and doing it that way. So
Hmm.
we've been doing it for I think a few cycles now, and we're starting to take some good traction. So it's good.
Hmm. Excellent. Thank you. That's a good point to tell our listeners that, as usual, we will put all the information, including the link to this book, the link to SignAgent, into our show notes. And there's two more messages I would like to tell you before we're going to finish this podcast. The first one is that we've agreed with David and with SignAgent, thanks for that, that listeners of this podcast can use a code which is MOTAS24. And if they're interested in the software and if they're going to buy the software or license the software, they will get a 10% discount with this code. So if you're interested, contact either us if you have questions in German, or contact SignAgent directly. Basically, we as somebody who's using it, we're happy to ask questions or contact the team of David, of course. And the second thing is we're going to have a workshop on 22nd of January with Design Austria, where we as Motas, we're going to present the software and tell you how we are using it, what are the advantages, what are specific features. So everybody who's interested, we're going to put the link for this workshop in the show notes as well. And David, thanks a lot for your time.
Hey, no,
It's
it's my pleasure.
it was my pleasure as well. I've learned a couple of new things, again when talking to you. Thanks a lot for your time,
Yeah.
and I'm going into the weekend now.
Yeah, likewise. We have our Christmas party this evening, so it's going to be a fun day. We've got all the employees have come to the Burlington area, so we've
Oh,
all
excellent.
converged on here. So we've got people from Seattle and Vancouver, and then yeah, we're all sort of connecting. So it's great.
Enjoy.